Welcome back, everyone. Good afternoon. So we're now going to enter into our third entry point in a girl's lifetime and focus specifically on the girl's transition to work. This panel will investigate technical and vocational education and training, otherwise known as TVET, and its role in helping to bridge the gap between schooling and work, especially for those girls who drop out of school. Moderating this discussion will be Kevin Cassidy, who is the Director and Representative to the Bretton Woods and Multilateral Organizations at the International Labor Organization. And joining him will be Ramhari Lamachane, Director General of the Colombo Plan Staff College, Nancy Taggart, Senior Youth and Workforce Advisor at the U.S. Agency for International Development, and finally, last but not least, Anil Paudel. Anil is an Echidna Global Scholar this year from Nepal, where he is also the CEO of Right for Children. There, he has led their child-friendly schools initiatives to enhance school environments for girls and other marginalized children in Nepal. He'll kick off this third policy panel with a presentation of his research findings and recommendations on the barriers to participation in TVET by girls in Nepal, and especially those who have dropped out of school. So please join me in welcoming Anil to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
It's an honor to present my research with you all here today. My research is about strengthening girls' transition to work through quality technical and vocational education and training, TVET programs in Nepal. As you all know, education has become one of the topmost priorities, both for the people and the government around the globe. The increased emphasis and investment in education has brought massive progress in sending children to school. In the case of Nepal, we are very close to achieving universal primary education. The enrollment rate at primary level has increased from 80% to 97% in the last 18 years. And more girls are now in school. But is that all what we wanted? Is this the end now? What about the promises, the returns, and outcomes of education? So it is these questions that bring us to the other side of the picture, which is quite sad. The school dropout is still a huge problem, especially for girls. More than 80% of those who are in primary school, they never complete secondary level. And the other sad thing is that the school to work transition rate is very poor, especially for women. Only 26% of women are in the labor force when they make up 56% of the total working age population. And because of this, so we can say the link between education and employment is very poor, or it's missing. And sadly, TVET, Technical and Vocational Education and Training, which is considered as one of the important instrument in strengthening this transition, is underemphasized, underinvested. Only around 3% of the total educational spending goes to support TVET, which is very sad. So this is the context out of which the interest of my research emerged. And here I would like to share you a story of a girl named Lakshmi, who I met around 6 years back. And she was only around 16 or 17 at that time. And she had left school when she was studying at grade 8. And I asked her the reason for leaving school. And she said, education is no more a priority for me and my family now. Survival and livelihood is more important than education for me at this stage. And that was very heart-touching. And she was living with her parents in the slum of Pokhara city, where I live and work. I'll come back to this story later. So continuing with my research, the objective of my research, the focus of my research was to find out the barriers for girls to participate in technical and vocational education and training. And for that purpose, I collected both secondary and primary informations. And to collect primary information, I visited 10 TVET institutes I talked to the administrator of those institutes, girls, some of them were current students, and some of them were graduates of TVET programs. And similarly, I also talked to some educational and TVET experts, private sector employers, and also I conducted some focus group discussion with 28 public school teachers. And my study found out that there are 3 major barriers that limit girls' chances to participate in these technical and vocational education and training programs. The first one is education, which includes very limited investment in TVET, and that's why the access to TVET is very limited. And there's no alternatives in the formal system for dropouts. And similarly, there's lack of career guidance, because girls, they have very less access to information about the occupations because they don't have career guidance at a school level. The second factor is societal. As you know, Nepal is a strong son preference country, so girls get less priority, especially in education and career. And also they have very limited access to, limited freedom to mobility. And often, to take part in these TVET programs, they have to travel, and parents are unwilling to send them. And the stereotypical gender roles. TVET is perceived to be the education for working class men. And so there are very few girls in TVET, and where there are females in TVET, their participation is skewed mostly in gender stereotypical courses such as nursing and caregiving, tailoring, these kind of courses. The third factor is labor market. The labor market environment is also not very encouraging and welcoming for women. That also helps to prevent them, limit their chances to join TVET courses. And here, I would again like to come back to the story of Lakshmi. Actually, I had met her in the process that we had this vocational training program that my organization used to run and still runs. And the program was designed for someone like Lakshmi, people from disadvantaged, especially youth from very disadvantaged background. And so we wanted to offer this opportunity to her. But she said she needs approval from her parents. And by that time, she was working as a child laborer. So her job was to collect sand by the riverside and carry it to the construction site. And we went to talk to her parents. They were unwilling to send her to participate in this program because they said they were thinking of her marriage. Later, we were somehow able to convince them, and they agreed to send her to do the course. And she chose to do a housekeeping course for hospitality industry. And as you know, there are these barriers. We need to remove these barriers. And my study had suggested some policy advice. And there's an urgency to act. When I say act, A-C-T, A stands for access, improving girls' access to TVET programs by increasing investment and by provisioning scholarship programs. C stands for completion, enabling girls to complete the TVET programs by making TVET gender responsive and gender transformative, because we need to ensure that there's equitable participation of both boys and girls, men and women. And T stands for transition, so we need to facilitate girls to transit to the workforce. And for that, we need to ensure that there is a match between TVET and the industry, and the labor market is also regulated so that the labor market becomes welcoming to girls and women. That's it. I'm sure you must be very curious to know what happened to Lakshmi next. Well, she completed 6 months of her training program, and then we helped her to find a job in one of the 5-star hotel, an entry-level housekeeping position. And now, after 6 years, she has become the executive of the housekeeping department of the same hotel. And not only this, she made a house of her own and moved her family out of slum. And on top of that, She is investing for the education of her siblings, 2 sisters and 1 brother. And I'm sure you are delighted to see her. So it's Lakshmi today. And here, both the story of Lakshmi and my research, they suggest that we need to improve our education system so that the education does not only give hopes and dreams to the youth, but it also essentially helps them to fulfill those dreams. And emphasizing gender-transformative TVET for girls could be the right alternative pathway. Thank you very much. So now, I'd like to invite on stage moderator Kevin Cassidy, along with the panelists Ramari Lamichane, Dr. Ramari Lamichane, and Nancy Taggart.
So Anil, thank you very much for your presentation there. I think we've seen, due to a range of macroeconomic developments, technological investment, lifelong learning agendas, demographic shifts, that TVET has risen to the top of the education policy and agendas across the world. In your research, you've centered on why it's so difficult for girls trying to educate through the TVET system. So how can it be potentially transformative, and why isn't it working to its full potential?
Well, the first thing, as I said, is there are several barriers. First, when we say education, we only think about education that is provided in the school, the general. At basic level, it's focused on basic education, achieving basic education, and at higher level, the education is too academic. So it has very poor link with the employment, the industry, with the life outcomes. So that is one of the core problem. And also I mentioned about these different factors, educational factors. A lot of children and young people, they leave school, mostly girls. And also there are other social norms factors, like these stereotypical roles. I mean, education is very less priority for girls. And on top of that, TVET, which is supposed to be market-oriented, is underemphasized, underutilized. Only around 2% of the post-secondary level students are in TVET programs. So this shows the problem. And again, the labor market is also not very welcoming. And so the need is to give emphasis on TVET, and increase investment in TVET, and also to make it gender transformative. When I say gender transformative, it is like it entails all those factors that ensure equitable participation of boys, girls, men, women in TVET. Mm-hmm. And so far, TVET is considered as I said, the education of men, not only men, education of working class men. So it's taken as very inferior type of education. That's also one of the problems.
Right. Can I just push you very quickly on that? And how are you engaging with the private sector to anticipate what those skills are that are necessary in these programs?
Yeah, I think that's very important, especially in TVET. The partnership and collaboration with private sector, with the industry is very important. Otherwise, the transition would again be in question. So in my organization, what we are doing, the program is so far quite successful, considered as very successful program. So we partner with private sector, especially hotel groups. They finance the program, as well as they also provide placements after the training. And that's what makes it a success.
Very good. Ramhari, if I could ask you, you've been working on TVET for many years in Nepal and beyond, and you've heard Anil's research. Any problems with his research? Do you see that consistent with your findings? And why hasn't it moved forward from your perspective, sir?
Thank you, Brookings and Anilji, for these initiatives and especially inviting me here. I am very thankful to the Brookings Institute. I think regarding his research, it is in right track, and what he has mentioned here, the barriers, all these barriers are still valid in the case of Nepal and most of the Asian context, like South Asia especially and some Southeast Asian countries as well. And in addition to that, I would like to tell there are some barriers like some attitude barriers from industry attitude and like a society attitude also major barriers for girl. We produce lot of graduate, even when I was in Nepal, I was the CEO of the TVET system of Nepal. That time even we provided training for this JCB operator, like a heavy equipment operator training for 100 women. Out of that only 10 girls got job. And I asked to the employer, contractor who operate the JCB, they said, because our JCB sometimes it has to operate in the night, evening, early in the morning, so girls cannot stay for a long time, but boys can stay, like that type of attitude they have. That's why to make more access, not only access to TVET, retention in TVET and provide gainful employment for the girls and like a woman, we have to conduct different orientations program, awareness program for employer, parents, society. That is very vital. If we think only the classroom and curricula things, it will not work. We have to think like a blue ocean strategy, beyond the box. There are some barriers which are beyond the box. Those barriers like attitude of employer, attitude of parents, even like he mentioned the hotel, like recently it is good, but if we talk about 5-10 years ago in Nepal, no single parents wanted to send their daughters to the hotel job. Because my background also tourism sector, I was in also Pokhara. And that time, why they said they thought differently. If girls goes to hotel like a negative connotations. But now it has changed because it changed because of education. That's why we call education is the key to development, but TVET is master key. Like TVET can open any room, education can only open one room. So nowadays I am experiencing, because now I am working in Manila, many Southeast Asian countries also, if you go to the TVET program, even in Philippines, you will find about 50% students from master degree holder. For short-term 6 months training, about 50% are from the graduate of university. That's why TVET is master key.
I see.
That's why there are some like a barrier, beyond the box barrier, social attitude, another things, one experience we did when we were in the like a policy level, government with the World Bank support, government provided scholarship to the girls to come TVET and educations. They came, but we found that later on the dropout rate became very high, because to receive that scholarship, they came to the school, classroom. But later on, after that scholarship, when the parents, the girls, spend that money for, snacks and other things, pen, pencils, and parents didn't send them. But later on, when we found that and we provided 5 liters cooking oil to the parents, then the girl enrollment increased. See, that is a very practical incident. Because parents were greedy to have 5 liters oil rather than the scholarship. It means we have to orient, we have to provide a lot of information and training to the parents. That is very important. So barriers is parents, employer and culture. That otherwise his point is right. So in addition to that, we have to think that way also.
Very good. I was going to ask you about culture and how that can actually impact upon TVET as well too. Nancy, I'd like to turn to you in USAID's approach to programming targeting youth employment, and why is it a gender issue?
Well, I think I'm speaking to the converted, as someone said earlier, so I think we all know this, but I can restate some of the ways that I think it resonates with me. I mean, the way we approach or we have now tried to emphasize more recently how we approach youth employment programming is by looking at the labor market demand. So TVET definitely has a role, but that has to be within what the demand is for in the labor market. And based on that, what the needs are, skills training and other interventions, looking at some of the sociocultural norms and the enabling environment, if you will, mentoring, access to finance, all of these form kind of a package of services that we typically offer. But we have to start with looking at what the labor market demand is rather than just pushing the skills training. But certainly there are gender issues throughout all of those different types of interventions. And when you're looking at the labor market demand, you have to understand how gender plays out. And of course, as we've talked about already today in several of the sessions, what types of careers women and men or young men and young women are attracted to and seek out, or what are the barriers within certain careers and occupations that we've talked about all have gender issues. So it's very relevant. I will say that within this sector, I do find it challenging to always bring a gender lens. Well, let me restate that. I think a gender lens is not often or sufficiently brought into looking at TVET programs. I feel like as we get older, as young people get older and we get to higher levels of education, I don't see consistently a gender lens being brought to workforce development and employment programs, and I think we need to do that more. And as a donor, that is something that we're trying to move toward more significantly. But we recognize that it is one, but it's not always the first thing that's top of mind, unfortunately.
Right, and I'm going to press you a little bit more on this. It's, not only it's just the numbers of jobs or the numbers of training and the graduation process, it's the quality of those jobs as well, too. We see a lot of times that the work guarantee programs there, it's unproductive work. How is USAID looking at that element of voice in the workplace and to ensure that the workers themselves have a quality job with opportunity and room for advancement?
So, I think Ramhari made the point about working with employers and raising awareness. So it's not just on the educators, and it's definitely the families and the parents and the spouses, but it's definitely the employers as well, and raising their awareness and working with them in partnerships. And we can talk about a little bit more about the role of private sector in various aspects later, but I think that's one key component, is engaging with them and then raising their awareness about their responsibilities, but also engaging young people, and that is certainly something that USAID is embracing much more with our youth and development policy for several years ago, but that we've been building on with a lot of our work in the past 5 years around youth voice, youth engagement. So again, we need to take those approaches and that philosophy and really apply it to the sector of TVET and workforce in terms of engaging young people to advocate around this area. And so connecting all these things that we do, I think is something we still need to continue to work on.
Great. You've mentioned youth, and Ramhari, I'd like to go back to you here. What do you see other governments doing to address the employment gap for youth? It's so important to get young people to work today. The educational levels, of course, are very important, but how do they transition from school to work? And, looking at it in the gender lens, as they've done in Nepal, what could other countries learn from this experience?
Very important question. So, if we have to minimize the gap between demand and supply, we have to think from pre-training stage. Most of the country, they think only in the during training stage. Like pre-training stage, my concern is curriculum development, like teacher development, classroom development. Now the industry is working with the IR 4.0, Industrial Revolution 4.0, but if you go to the lab of the training institute, you will find TVET 1.0. Means there are equipment like lathe machines of 1962. And if you go to the industry, there are CNC. And automated, like she mentioned about the Bangladesh thing. In Bangladesh, there are two high risks for the employees, like one in garment sector, another is call center. Even in Philippines, maybe after 1 year, all the millions of call center people will be jobless. So what will be the retraining for them? So the TVET provider has to think. Many females are working there. So in that case, curriculum development, classroom development, teacher development, and in Philippines now, I'll tell one example. Government decided to go for like a TVET teachers should be industry experience one. Like in Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand, at least 2 years industry experience teachers should be TVET teacher. Philippines also did that, but even they don't have even 20% TVET. Like Philippines is good country in the participation of female. I have to say there are male deprived in Philippines, not other country like that. But even though like industry experience policy made industry experience teacher for TVET, but no one female instructor has industry experience. That's why for that, they have to work with industry very closely, like immersion for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or 1 year, like a gradual basis. And another program is most of the like Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand and Philippines. They are working very closely with industry in like a dual training system, like German model. That is one of the best for linking girls. They do aptitude test, and most of the institute, the students select by the industry. They select the student and they send to the TVET institute. And after graduation, they provide guarantee for 100% job. Like they are partnering with Toyota Motor, Samsung, and many others. So that is one of the good model. And another is like, Philippines government recently started RPL, recognition of prior learning assessment, even in the workplace, like in Saudi or in Dubai, Hong Kong, because many Filipino are in about 20 million Filipinos are in foreign work. So now government go to the different country to test them there and provide certificate there. It means they are more focusing to the target market with partnering with industry. So this type of work will, and like apprenticeship model is increasing because of the Korea and Japan influence in that area, and even China is supporting a lot. If we go to the Chinese TVET system, I think that is one of the best TVET system now in the world.
I think Germany may push back on you.
Because I have seen, because China is not much exposed in the other country, but their system is very strong with industry. Every polytechnic they have this business incubation center and sort of things. So that will link with the job market. So I think these are the very good part of that.
Right. You've raised a lot of good issues there on pre-training. We're looking obviously also at continuous professional development for the TVET trainers as well too, and also the adaptation to the social economic conditions, because what works in Germany or what works in China may not work in Nepal or other places. Anil, just to sort of push a little bit here on the TVET, as a strategy, governments get it. They know that they have to increase women's workforce participation rates. That's the only way in order to increase economic growth in these countries and to address poverty. I mean, the best way out of poverty for the ILO is looking at decent work, having a good job for oneself. What can civil society do, NGOs like yours, what can you do to kind of push that agenda forward to create better TVET systems?
I think civil society organizations like NGOs, definitely, they can't do a lot, but they can do some, which is like very crucial and important. I think especially for NGOs, they can provide a model to the government. So an example which government can replicate or scale up and rethink about the education policy. So because we have been doing these programs, and there are other NGOs in Nepal and that have really become very successful and impactful, like the case of Lakshmi. Now, it's not just Lakshmi. There are 1,000 other girls like Lakshmi who are in need of such opportunities, who are no more in school, but who are in need of such opportunities. And NGOs can't provide opportunities for all, but they can provide model. So very good model, very strong model, a powerful model, which government can take on. And especially also, we're talking about this partnership with private sector. So NGOs are doing, because our NGO is doing, there are others who are doing that. So government has to learn from those programs and then make necessary changes, reformulation in the policy, so that all such girls get the opportunity.
So give me one or two qualities of a really effective TVET program, and one that creates a transformative agenda. We hear about gender responsive and so, but transformative is an entirely different.
Yes. I mean, like when I say TVET, it's not just the technical skill or work skill. I think there are other important factors as well. So together with technical skills, work skills, social skills, life skill is also a very important thing. So we need to consider and combine that. And there are these technologies these days, and youth should be familiar with those technologies, IT skills. Yes, and we need to look at the factors that limit the chances of girls, especially. So we need to make the infrastructure girl-friendly, and we may need to have like female instructors. So there are these kind of things, and role models. So this will help to ensure girls' participation. And when reformulating policies, even developing curriculums, pedagogy, they need to be sensitive, responsive. So we need to, I think, look at these things. I think they are very critical.
Very good. Thank you very much. Nancy, I'm going to come back to you and look at a international sort of framework. So for USAID, what is the role of bilaterals such as USAID can play, and what are the lessons that you have learned in the youth economic empowerment programs that you run?
Yeah, I mean, I think Anil touched on a few of these. I think taking models that are often started by an NGO and then demonstrating that, so proving something works, and then working with the government to scale it up. And doing that effectively, usually, and we touched on this in the morning as well, the whole concept of leadership. So having that buy-in and the will to reform or to innovate on the part of the government really does make a difference. So that's a huge lesson. So scaling through government systems is usually, or private sector, but I think government is really where it's at, but demonstrating innovation first and getting that goodwill from the government, or tapping into leaders where you think you can have an entry point to innovate. And then the other is getting trust between businesses and the private sector and the government. And that is maybe kind of an ongoing effort sometimes, but showing to businesses that government is willing to reform, innovate, it's open to working together to getting input from private sector. So, I mean, I think there have been different strategies. Again, the leadership makes a difference, but that trust, I think, is really important. The other thing that I think is interesting that we've seen in some USAID-funded work, but work funded by DFID and others, is this issue of making the business case to businesses. And I love hearing how you're already getting financing from businesses to pay for the training. I mean, that's a whole area that I think is really exciting to think about. How you scale it may be another discussion or a continued part of the discussion, but how you can get businesses to help pay for it or invest or cost share, what have you, or co-invest with in-kind support, but making the business case to them along the same lines as we make with governments, where they recognize that there's an economic value of investing in women's education, showing businesses that their bottom line can benefit by getting more women in quality jobs and to stay on the job. So there's been some interesting work in the Middle East. I think AWEF and SEEP have been documenting some of that. So I think that there's some interesting lessons to learn from that as well. Not necessarily USAID, but things to look at.
So maybe to speak broadly about that, I'm sure in the room there are a number of NGOs, and they've had discussions with governments, sometimes even for an international organization like the ILO. We sometimes don't find that it penetrates into a lot of the thinking. Have civil society been successful? Can you maybe give a few examples on that, or do you think it's just a lost cause?
Civil society in terms of demonstrating models that work? Is
That's
that what
right,
you mean?
yes.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few countries where USAID has been investing for quite a while, where I would speak to. Maybe some of you guys have heard of talk about them too much, but I mean, I think the case of Rwanda is an interesting one, where you had government will, and you had an NGO model that was doing soft skills training primarily, but also some of the other interventions around internships and job placement, and the government took parts of that and has been scaling that up. and then they've gone on to kind of adapt it for different contexts and for more rural youth. But that's a great example.
Okay. We're now going to shift to the barriers to adulthood here. I mean, a very difficult transition from school to work. It's something that the ILO is embedded in its program and budget for the next biennium and coming out of our review of the future of work. You've mentioned, Anil, in your reporting some of the challenges that girls face, educational, labor market, society, and that there's a preference for boys in these programs seen as a working man's, even the language itself, right, the working man's area. And so, but can you speak a little bit about how your study revealed challenges that both young women and men face alike?
Yes. So when I talk about these problems, the barriers, there are three, but but again, there are like two other barriers, problems, major problems. One is systemic, which is both for girls and boys. When there is underinvestment in TVET, when there is very little access, it's both for girls and boys. It's not only for girls, also for boys. So to give you an example, in Nepal, so the access to TVET is very limited. Dr. Lamithane knows there are only around 50,000 spots annually in formal TVET, whereas there are more than 500,000 new entrants in the labor market every year. So it's just not for girls, it's also for boys. But for girls, it's more limited, given the social norms factors and gender norm factors. So girls are underprivileged, yes, they are more deprived. So especially when we talk about education to livelihood or childhood to livelihood. The other thing is, again, the education. What type of education are we talking about? Is sending children to school, is that all? I mean, that's not enough. Because we want something from education. Because parents, they don't want to send children to school just for nothing. So there are expectations, there are hopes. We want education to help us in improving our life outcomes. So, but focusing in general education, or like when education is too academic, this does not guarantee. I mean, especially we need to link the education with the need and demand of the market, which is lacking in our case. I think it's also in most of the other developing countries, the problem is the same. So we need to reconnect education with the industry, with the market. And that would give hopes, and that would also help to ensure better life outcomes. And yes, so there are systemic challenges, which are both for girls and boys, but there are more societal, social, gender kind of norms, barriers that are more for girls, that prevent girls, that limit their chances. That's what my study found.
Do you find that that traditional education may be crowding out TVET, or there may be a stigma attached to TVET in any way in your research?
Yes, these days, because education has become so important. We want all our children to go to school, and not only school, because every parents, they dream of sending their children to private school, which is very expensive. But the question is again the same: why we need education? And yes, definitely the education system is lacking this connection, this link, which we need to look at and focus and redefine education. I see the need of redefining education and improving the system. So the current system, it has very little opportunities for the children to prepare them for the world of work.
Thank you very much. Nancy, in terms of USAID, you focus quite a lot on the support for youth in the transition to the workforce, and including not just the basic skills, but also some people call soft skills or cognitive skills. This could be communication and teamwork and innovation and problem solving. And so based on what Anil has shown in his research, how could this broader sort of swath of skills help improve TVET and the performance for young women?
Sure. Well, at USAID, we have invested for several years on looking at the links between soft skills or social emotional learning and workforce or employment-related outcomes, as well as other positive outcomes for youth. And social emotional learning, it's still a mouthful for me to get after, because I just used the soft skills shorter. Soft skills and social emotional learning are fundamental to our education policy, which Leanna mentioned this morning. So yes, these are very important for us. And I think for TVET and how to make it better or to contribute to what we're talking about today, I think soft skills are really important because they can help young women, young men navigate some of these challenges in different pathways for work and careers. They can make them, I mean, there's plenty of evidence that shows that makes young people, helps them be more resilient to challenges that they may confront. And they're portable. So they're not tied to a specific sector or industry. So as growth sectors may change and come and go, then these types of skills can be taken and applied to different opportunities that may come down the road. So I think soft skills and that kind of a broad approach, along with foundational skills such as literacy and numeracy, depending on what type of cohort we're reaching, what their needs are, I think are very important to be investing in. I don't think skills are the only answer, so I do think they have to be accompanied by some of these other interventions we've talked about, but I think those types of skills are pretty important, and the evidence shows that.
Right. I mean, there are obviously underlying social, economic sort of issues that need to be addressed as well, too, for these programs to be successful. Can I just push a little bit on that as well? We talk about STEM quite a lot, and I think what we see when we speak to employers, these sort of soft skills or cognitive skills, I mean, that comes from a different part of the brain. It's the artistic side. So there is a move to move STEM to STEAM. So we add the arts in there as well, too. Do you have any experience in USAID programs and looking at the sort of arts element into this? Or is it really just on you mentioned beyond just the technical skills. So I'm wondering if that's a part of it as well.
Well, I can't speak to the arts in particular, but I feel like we have shown through a lot of our programs in the past, I would say 3 or 4 years in different countries, some in actually Southeast Asia, where you're trying to integrate, it's not just about the technical, but you're trying to integrate the soft skills into the technical curriculum. So you're not teaching the soft skills in isolation, and that really reinforces the ability to apply these to specific trades or tasks and so forth. So, and it's about the internships and the work-based learning, as we call it. So all of that helps reinforce the soft skills in addition to the technical.
Great. I'm really glad to hear that. Ramhari, let's come back to you. We see here in the Nepal example that the general education system serves a very small percentage, about 20% of the student population, and TVET even just 1/10 of that as well too. So addressing these structural bottlenecks, what are the policies that you have observed that can help get around these problems and help the girls continue these and graduate from these programs and have success in the world of work?
The main thing is, access is definitely the key issues, but today's key issue is not access, the quality TVET. In the name of number games, in many countries there are many institutions. Like I'll give you one example. Once upon a time there was 700 institute in Malaysia. And the government decided very bold decisions, and they brought into 33 polytechnics. And one polytechnic is now providing 50,000 students per polytechnic, but now their quality is good. So not only the access, definitely for access, the physical access, like a geographical access, financial access, are they able to do that? And another is time, also very important for girls, especially in those countries like South Asia. In my experience, when we conducted training program in the morning shift and evening shift, the participation was less because they have to involve in the household works. Because female are great. They are doing 300% more work than men in South Asia, but they are not considering good citizen because of household works. When we change the timing like 11 to 3, more participations, because that is a free time. Normally in South Asia, except work like official works, we'll take bronze, not lunch. No breakfast and no lunch. So after bronze, they can join to the training, and they can, if we leave them around 3-4, more participation. So time-wise also access things is very important. That is one part. Another is main thing is quality. Like, I can give one example. In Nepal, the enrollment is 20,000 female, total programs. But if you see the pass rate in diploma programs and technical SLC, we call school living, the pass rate is around only 10%. Means the training program is not good. In the name of access, we provided technical school everywhere in the mountain, but there is no teacher, there is no lab, there is no internet, even there is no electricity. Most of the, because the context, we have to conduct a training program in the 5,000 meter, like near base camp of Mount Everest. So we have to take the help of the solar, If the clouds came, then solar will not work. So then how can we think about, so quality is very important, because if we do not think the quality TVET today, we will make disadvantaged people, especially like poor people, by poor training programs, making poor readiness for the poor employment. That is another injustice for them. That's why quality is mainly important, and for access definitely financing and societal. And one main barrier nowadays, even like us, like educated, if I will give very good example, if there is a, let's say, proposal for wedding in the society, one candidate is master degree pass, but no job. Another is plumber, earn 100,000 rupees, $1,000 per month, but parents will choose that master degree unemployed one. So that's why the main barrier is the mindset of the parents and society. If we change that, definitely the girls' education will improve. That is my experience. Still, we talk in the forum like this, but if you go to the real implementation, even educated people will hesitate to do that type of things, So right. We are not respecting, like developed country, US, Germany, Switzerland, they are respecting to the skills.
Right.
There is no matter. Do you have job? Yes, but in our country, they will ask another question, what type of job?
Exactly. And thank you.
In the US, nobody will ask what type of job. Do you have job? Yes. Finish. Yeah. See, that is the barrier.
Unless you're in
Right.
Washington.
Yeah.
Well, there's student loans to pay, so I think any job is a good job for a lot of parents for their children, yes? I think now the time has come to Q&A for the floor. Some of the issues that we didn't raise here, family responsibilities, the sharing of those responsibilities may go a very long way in helping that. This sort of cultural custom, or maybe the misuse of cultural custom in some instances that we've seen around the world. What happens if there's no jobs? You have so many talented and trained people, and that becomes a national security issue if you don't have employment for people. And also learnability, right? Learning for the future of work. So I'd like to open up to the floor and take a few questions. If you tell me your name, your affiliation, and please keep your question to the form of a question, please. Please.
Hi, my name is Si Yu. I'm from China. Right now I'm a grad student in the GW. My major is international education program. I was really interested in TVET education because right now I want to do a research on vocational education about China. So thank you for pricing the Chinese. And I have a question about internationalization, because you talk about the quality of TVET education. I want to know that what kind of the relationship of some cooperative program in TVET education. I mean, for example, in China, that if that students have better choice to go to public universities, but they would not choose go to the kind of the TVET educations. So that's kind of the second choice for students to go TVET educations, especially. Okay.
Yeah. No.
Sorry.
Please conclude. But we just want to get to a few others, please.
I just want to know the internationalizations of internationalizations in TVET educations and the dynamic of public institute and private institutes there.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Concepcion with Age Africa. I have just a real quick question as in the past, our organization has trained young ladies participating in our life skills program in solar panel installation. So I was just curious to see what TVET is offering with regards to opportunities, or what do you see that exist with the intersectionality of girls' education and contributing to the climate change agenda?
Thank you very much. I believe the lady here in the first row, please.
Hi. So in India, Ministry of Skills in our country started a huge program for youth in terms of giving them vocational training, et cetera, et cetera. 6 months of lot of money, 500 million or so, and World Bank.
India.
Yes, and 500 million World Bank pledged. We saw that after 6 months, all the youth who were getting trained, there was a attrition rate. Only 30% remained in jobs or market, rest all dropped out. We were trying to look out at what is the problem, what's going on, and we realized coming back right from the early years, it needs to be linked in the school system. That means there are 4 phases probably you have to look into the education system. Aspirational building starts as early as primary years when you're looking at role models in your parents and communities. Then you come to orientation on careers and vocational. You come to planning on that in the older ages, and then eventually decision making. So that's the whole trajectory. That means the education system has an extremely, extremely important role to play.
Your
I would want
question,
to
please?
know
Yes, please.
from
The
Nepal,
question.
how are you linking to this education system? Because it is not just one program or a model that has worked, which government has to scale up, but it is a collaboration that they need to do it with the private sector.
Thank you. Sorry, we just want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak. Let's address those first 3 questions, and then we'll have a second round. So the panelists, please, we've had 3 questions on corporate involvement, internationalization of TVET systems. We talked about solar panel installations, climate change, and how it speaks to that issue, and talking about the youth retention in jobs.
Okay. So regarding the first questions, like regarding internationalization of TVET in China's case, like main thing is, we have to respect the blue-collar job, like that is the societal and cultural barrier. Like that's why first important the thing is, we have to change our mindset. I already mentioned, like developed economy, they never categorize. Even they categorize internally, but not exposed like what we are doing. Like Germany and US even. But in our part, like TVET is still considering second category. So to change that, first we have to change our mindset. Then only we can respect TVET. Because for that, we have to show students from the employment perspective, outcomes of the educations. If you go TVET, the result will be about like gainful employment chance is about more than 90%. But if we go to general educations, that is about 50%. Because of the informal economy, more TVET graduates will get job. And even like employment opportunity also very high. So from that perspective, we should be linked with the education. Then people's motivations towards TVET. That is my suggestion. And regarding the other issues like why retention rate is not good, dropout rate is very high. Because I am very sorry, even USAID support program, because Ma'am Nancy will stay here, but program will implement by different NGOs and different consulting firm. And even government, like I'm not blaming the NGO only, not one to government. What the implementer, the grassroots implementer will do, their focus will be to the number game, not the quality. Like a report, we completed 100% training for 5,000. So what type of training? How many percent gainful employment? We never evaluate our output, outcome and impact. We will go only the immediate output, number game. That's why most of the training institute focus on collection, not the selection.
Right. Our time is
So
becoming
that's why retention rate is very low. That is my experience.
Right. Ramchari, I'll pass to Nancy, please.
Well, and just to build on that, I mean, I think particularly looking at gender issues and retention, and plenty of other regions, looking at Central America and the Latin American region, you see this very high numbers of completion, but then they either don't transition or they don't stay on the job for many of the reasons we've talked about: discrimination, harassment, et cetera. And one of the things I was going to recommend, if we had the chance where we asked that question, was the fact that we need to collect more data to generate evidence, as I think Rob Jenkins was speaking about this morning. And we don't tend to do that with a gender lens, at least I have not seen that sufficiently within USAID. So I would like to see us do that more so that we can analyze what's happening after the program. In terms of the climate change question, we tend to try to avoid picking a sector. So I think, yes, there's definitely opportunities for environmental jobs. Plenty of regions have growth sectors based around renewable energies. But so I think that can dovetail well, partnering with industry to offer those types of trainings. But usually we want that to be derived by the context or the economic context. Yeah.
Right. Neil, I'm going to give you the last word, please.
I just want to add a few things here. I think my study found out one very important thing, which is the lack of vocational orientation at a school level. Because many of these young people, they don't know about their career choices. And like when suddenly they have secondary degree and they're confused what to study next. So I think what is really important is to provide this vocational and professional orientation or career guidance at a school level when they are in maybe grade 6, 7, so that they have informed choices when they finish their school. So that's lacking, and I think it also has to do with the respect for the work, because we need to educate them early so that they respect every type of work. I think that's missing, and even in my study, when I talked to a lot of these girls who were in TVET programs, they had never even heard about those courses like automobile engineering, geometric sciences, engineering. So, I mean, so that's one thing that's also limiting their choices and opportunities. And the other thing is the match. When I talk about match, it's not just the match between supply and demand and supply. It's also the match between the program and the target group, because we need to make sure that these programs go to the right people who need this. And when I was doing another study, it was a project supported by Asian Development Bank. There were these skill development training program for youth, and there were a lot of graduates who were doing these 3 months of training, and they never wanted to become plumber, but they were doing the course. There were other benefits, and they were enrolled to get those benefits, not to become plumber. So that's also one of the things. The retention issue is also because of that, I think.
And one last time, because I forgot, because policy, if we do retain things, definitely girls' participation will increase. I will give the example of Nepal. Now in our constitution, it is well written, in every program, every aspect, there should be at least 33% female. That's why Nepal is the country where the highest percentage of female parliament member now in the world. We have president, female president.
Right, and we've broken that rule on this panel, only 25%.
Like in education, that's why that is very important things.
Great. I do apologize. Time is a cruel master here, so I'm afraid we'll have to stop. I wanted to thank Neil Padul and Nancy Taggart, and of course Ram Nahari. You've given me a lot to think about here. I wish we had another hour, but I'm afraid we don't. I want to thank Brookings very much, and thank you very much for your questions and interest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos from Brookings.